All right. A very good afternoon, colleagues on call, and a very good afternoon to the other audience that is physically here at Design Hub for the Kampala Innovation Week. And those that we've been able to select to appear on this call, we have a live Ubilo audience that is on now. So the audience that we have, Dr. Christian, is bigger than what you see on call. We'll try to limit it for those who are joining live on Zoom, but rather we have a wider audience that is currently watching through. So I would want to start us off for this orientation workshop, where we'll be having sort of an engagement with Dr. Christian, courtesy of CAS Uganda and Southern Sudan. So before we can allow Dr. Christian to come through to make his presentation and of course usher us into the discussion, allow me to invite my colleague and my friend Nicholas Opolot, who is the programs officer at CAS Uganda. And Nicholas will be doing the introduction, of course, talking about much more about the exciting opportunity of Startup Uganda working with CAS Uganda, Southern Sudan. And then thereafter, we'll usher in Dr. Christian to take us off. So Opolot, here is the platform for you to make your introductions and of course, remarks regarding this particular session and our other future engagements with CAS. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Gilbert, for having me join this discussion. I'm excited to be here, and it's day 3 of the Kampala Innovation Week. The energy is still the same. The participation is still, it's going up, and we're getting great conversations online. Everyone's interested in how startups become resilient, how they recover in the post-pandemic. And I think it's a very good discussion. But here with us today, we will be having a more strategy-led discussion on how we can position startups to sort of grow and become globally competitive and to also tap into the other global networks that we have. So I'm pleased to represent CAS Uganda, which is also known as the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. We are based in Uganda and South Sudan, and we're a German political foundation. So we have 3 pillars of our work. We have democracy, rule of law, and innovation. So this particular project and program that we are collaborating with Startup Uganda is a very important project to us. It's of very keen interest and forms a critical component of the work that we do. So under CAS programming, innovation falls under the social market economy component, where we feel we need to support more businesses, more startups to be able to create the community impact and have a more centered approach in terms of social impact. And that's why we are having this partnership with Startup Uganda, in which we're collaborating with them to host the Kampala Innovation Week along with the other partners, Enable and UNCDF together. So three focus areas for our partnership are centered around facilitating discussions, enabling the ecosystem, and contributing to the ecosystem through the networks that we have, such as the ones that we've extended with Dr. Christian, and moving forward into having more extended engagements. So this program directly falls under the Startup Digital Cafe, which we had initially been implementing in Berlin, and we used to host Ugandan startups in Germany and have an exchange program where we expose them to the German startup ecosystem, introduce them to ecosystem builders, and also do investor matching with key players in the sector. So this program is entering its 3rd year, and we are very excited to see it grow. And we hope that with the new partnership with Startup Uganda, it's going to become more broad and more inclusive of other startups that have previously not been under our radar. So we hope that more startups can benefit from the peer-to-peer exchange platform, which we're building with Startup Uganda, which is a consortium of all the innovation hubs in the country. So we're going to see more crossover partnerships coming up, and we hope that this will build a stronger ecosystem And we hope to learn more with the linkages that we'll be creating, such as this one. One of the challenges that we found was that we had an existing knowledge gap. There was little that's known about the ecosystem, and we needed people to have more information on how they can engage with the startup ecosystem in Uganda. And I'm happy to see that efforts are being made by Startup Uganda to see that the ecosystem is mapped out properly and that investors get to know as much information as they can about the sector. So on the first day of the Kampala Innovation Week, we launched the Startup Annual Survey, which is more like which gives concrete and broad insight into the startup ecosystem, and it maps out the key challenges, the key opportunities, the key recommendations, who are the key players, and where investors need to start looking. And this also fits into the shared belief of us building the social market economy and seeing that we know exactly where we are going to create the impact from. And we can't be able to do this if we don't put numbers to it. So we need to be able to know who the players are, what are the demographics that are influencing the growth in the startup market. So I'm glad to be here to contribute to this discussion today, which will enable our strategic thinking, where we can also brainstorm ideas on how we can tap into more initiatives and also create more awareness of some of the existing programs we have and see how we can engage with the ecosystem players in Germany. So I would like to hand you back to Gilbert to carry on the session. Thank you for your time.
Okay, many thanks, Nicholas. Nicholas has been very good to us. Of course, our regards to Anna, the country director at CAS. We shall miss her for this session, but of course, she has always been part of our engagement. So without really further ado, I want us to welcome Dr. Christian, who will be taking us through the first session or segment of this discussion. And of course, thereafter, we shall have more of an engagement after his presentation and his session. So Dr. Christian, you're most welcome, and over to you, sir. Yeah.
Many thanks, Gilbert, as well as Nicholas, as well as to the Kampala Innovation Week and the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. It's really great to be part of this week's event. I've seen so many engaging discussions so far. It is great to see how many people you brought together with Startup Uganda within the Kampala Innovation Week. And comparing that with Germany, it's great to see that all the relevant players are coming together and that they start to build the ecosystem, what you need to grow as a startup community, but also to help for the general economic growth in Uganda. So congratulations from my side for such a successful setup of the Kampala Innovation Week. And I'm really looking forward into our today's workshop. What I quickly discussed with Nicholas is that I will quickly give you an overview of the German startup ecosystem, some insights, some facts and figures about our startup association, because I hope that will also help us to discuss better what you are currently doing, where we might work together, where we see synergies, or where you are already on a great way to build something similar to what we started nearly 10 years ago here in Germany. So let me quickly share my screen with all participants in that workshop. And it will be like 20 minutes presentation, and then we can start the discussion. Okay, so let me quickly. Perfect. Can you give me a quick yes if you see my presentation, Gilbert? Perfect. So the German Startup Association was established nearly 10 years ago. We started as a very small private setup to create an environment and an ecosystem for the German startups. What I would like to do today is quickly walk you through the setup of the German Startup Association. I would quickly give you some insights into the ecosystem, some facts and figures. We'll quickly also discuss the German Africa Network, what we built and where we are still trying to find partners and collaboration. And then we open it up for question and answers. So what we do in Germany with the German Startup Association, we see the startups as the economic engine of the future. So we support the startups in all central topics within the startup ecosystem towards the political agenda. We try to create an equal exchange. We exchange knowledge and experiences. And of course, we try to establish a startup culture which makes the German and Europe startups a friendly environment and location under the best conditions to succeed in the startup space. Let me also quickly define what we understand as a startup, because that's also sometimes very important when we have these discussions. What is a startup? For us at the Startup Association, a startup is younger than 10 years. It is highly innovative concerning technology and the business model, and has a significant growth of employees or sales. This is for us very important to define who is the relevant group we are representing towards all the other shareholders and stakeholders in the ecosystem. That brings us to the three main pillars for the association. So what we do is lobbying. So we really try to represent the interests of all our founders towards the political levels, but also towards other institutions. That was very important during the COVID crisis, because we represented a very big group in Germany, which also had needs and concerns during the crisis. We do research. We are the pioneers in startup research. So with our startup monitor, and I will come back to it later when I talk about the ecosystem, we've been the first, even in Europe, to really, from a research perspective, go into the details and the setup of the startup ecosystem. And we already have the 9th edition of the Startup Monitor. Of course, we do networking. Networking, we connect startups, first of all, with each other, but we also connect startups with the relevant stakeholders, with established companies, and we connect startups cross-border, what we do today. So we are the voice of the German startups. That's not only towards the political players, it's also we create visibility, we create a founder-friendly environment, and we are also the key drivers of the digital trends and transformation. As you can see, we already have more than 10,000 startups in our association. And that's great to see. And that is also the power. And we discussed it on Monday in the presentation already. If you bring together the relevant startups and you create a critical mass, then the other stakeholders will listen to you or even reach out to you for collaboration and for synergies. So that was our big game changer to reach fast scale within the startup scene. Quickly zooming into our platforms and networks, most of our platforms and networks work the same way. So we try to establish exchange within the network. We empower the people and the startups in the network to really push for favorable regulations and an environment for startups. We are connecting, as I said, startups, but also with the relevant industries. Visibility and a specific focus for the startups is also very important for us to help with. And you can see some examples of our platforms and networks. Of course, we are a lot in the digital space. That includes digital health, fintech, energy, future mobility, just to name a few. And of course, we also have within Germany regional representations to help on the ground with the startups. We have a lot of events, unfortunately, during COVID crisis, not all in physical meetings, but also a lot of virtual meetings. Normally, we also do our delegation trips. We have conferences where we attend. We have pitch events to find out who are the best in the room when it comes to different startups. So this is what we do. We are very proud of our German Startup Award we established in 2020. It is an event to really find out who are, for example, the best female founders, the best investors, the best VCs, the best support. So, and this also created a lot of visibility within the German ecosystem. We realized very early as a startup association that we need to also speak cross-border. It's not just Germany. A lot of the German startups are really interested also in other markets. So we established links to China, to Israel, of course, to the US, to India, and we built these corridors and we set up delegation trips with our startups, but also established companies to join us. And there will be more. We've been already in planning for a week in Africa, but then unfortunately we had the COVID crisis, but we are still keen to have such a week and such an exchange with different countries in Africa, or maybe a region. Let's call it, for example, East Africa, where we can work together on such a corridor. Quickly looking into the startup ecosystem, just a few facts, and we can discuss a bit more in detail, but I will run you through with the highlights. So we have the German Startup Monitor. The German Startup Monitor is a survey-based monitor which tries to find out how the ecosystem currently works. What are the needs? What are the concerns? So facts and figures. And in the 9th edition of the German Startup Monitor, we had more than 2,000 startups participating, representing more than 5,000 founders and more than 33,000 employees in the startup scene. So you can see there's a lot of feedback we receive from the startups, from our community, and that helps us to be visible, transparent in regards to the startup ecosystem. The German startups are creating many jobs. If you look at it in 2021, on average, we had nearly 18 employees within the German startups, planning for another 9. We have, of course, a few hubs where it's bigger, like in Berlin, more than 50 people on average within a startup. That's impressive, and that's creating many, many jobs. And it will be interesting to see. And I already heard some facts and figures about Uganda in that regard. We are already very international. Nearly 1/3 of the employees per startup are coming from an international background, from Europe, America, Asia, but also from the African continent, which is great to see. Again, the big hubs like Berlin nearly have 50% of international employees. And you can see most of the startups in Berlin, the company language is English. So it is already very, very international. Something which I really like is the next slide. We increased the female founders from nearly 16 to nearly 18% from 2020 to 2021. So that's a huge progress. Again, it's not enough. We have still space for more female founders in Germany. So we definitely need to work on that, maybe learning from Africa, because what I see in various African countries is that female founders, the percentage is much higher. So we definitely need to talk about that, how you enable them, how you support them. Is there a different structure? So I would be really interested in that fact. A lot of the startup founders have an academics background, economics, but also the STEAM subjects, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So nearly more than 80% are coming with an academic degree before they set up the business. Also looking at the team formation, and I'm fairly sure it is similar in Uganda. A lot of the founders meet at university. They are already friends or family, or they are founders coming from a previous employer together, because they said, well, that's something we can do ourselves, or they picked up a niche in that field, and then they came up with their own startup. Industry, it's also not surprising. A lot of information and communication technology. Nearly 1/3 of the startups are playing in that field. We saw a huge increase in medical and healthcare, not surprising during the COVID crisis. The importance, but also like with fast-moving startups, we could implement a lot of new things to help to fight the pandemic. So that was great, but it will also be the way forward interesting to have more medical and healthcare startups. And the rest, like nutrition, but also automotive, mobility and logistics, it's also a bit more B2B instead of the B2C from a business model. Coming to the business models, we see a lot of digital business models, not surprising. Software as a service and online platforms are leading in that regard. We do have also hybrid models where like technology development and production as a hybrid model work quite well. But we also still have some analog business models, purely like analog services, stationary trade and sales. So it's not purely digital businesses. So everybody tries to find a niche. The sourcing, the sources of funding are also not surprising. We still see a lot of state funding, especially in the early stages of the startups, pre-seed, seed phase, and business angels also early stage, family and friends early stage. And then when it comes to Series A or Series B financing, we see more the venture capital, the bank loans, but also the strategic investors coming in when it gets to the scaling and growth. Still, a lot of the startups are very happy with the startup ecosystem. Nevertheless, there are some more homework we have to do. And that's also why we do that startup monitor, to understand better about the satisfaction in the ecosystem, as you can see. Still some challenges on the ground. Sales, customer acquisition is very important. Product development, capital raising, cash flow, liquidity, and recruitment. Just to name the top 5 of the challenges we saw in recent years. And these things are also where we always say we want to learn cross-border from other countries. Is it the same, or how do they tackle these kind of challenges? So in a summary for the for the Startup Monitor, startups are shaping our future. They are again back on track after the COVID crisis. Nevertheless, we still see some challenges where we need more political support or more incentives for the growth, which is very important. And we see international competitiveness as one of the big challenges we are having, and we hope that with the international teams we can tackle these challenges. Quickly running through the Africa network of the German Startup Association. I don't need to tell you the great potential of Africa. I think that's clear for all the participants today. A young population. We have a lot of digital natives. We see startup hubs, incubators, co-working spaces across the continent, really looking after the challenges and solving them on a daily basis with startups and young entrepreneurs, which is really great, and we can learn from each other. The goals for the Startup Association in regards to the African network are also straightforward. We want to connect as we do today, and hopefully the way forward. We would like to exchange and learn from each other, really going through the challenges, but also how we solve the challenges. We would also like to develop things together. Why not realizing synergies? Why not doing business together? I think that's something which, especially across borders with such a potential Africa has, we should definitely look in. And the 4th goal is influence. So if we have a common strength cross-border, speaking to the politicians, speaking to other institutions, we can influence the regulatory environment. We can make it more founder and startup friendly. And that will help all startups to grow on all sides. Yeah, we've done a lot since 2.5, 3 years within the corridor, within the Africa network. We hosted a lot of delegations, also a delegation from Uganda in early 2020, just before the crisis started, which was brilliant to see all the energized entrepreneurs from Uganda. But we also go on conferences on the corridor and help to really build the ecosystems with our experience and with all the synergies given. Yeah, this is something we can discuss, and I like to get some more insights, especially from Startup Uganda. I mean, we try to establish partnerships with various associations. As I said, we go to conferences, we host delegations, and then also other visits. We would like to exchange knowledge, but also set up maybe new startup programs to help in the ecosystem. As I said, I tried to keep it short. We can always go back to some facts and figures if it's interesting for the people in our workshop today. I'm more than happy to answer questions in regards to my presentation, but also looking forward to a discussion with you, Gilbert, and the other participants. So I will quickly stop my presentation here and thank you for giving me the time to present the German startup ecosystem.
All right, many thanks, Dr. Christian, for that presentation. Of course, it has been basically re-emphasizing some of the things that we shared on Monday. And again, for purposes of our colleagues who are on this call and those who are watching live on Hubilo, we on Monday did agree that the opportunities that the German startup ecosystem has and the opportunities that the Ugandan startup ecosystem has are more or less the same. We were able to see that the milestones that you guys have come up with are more or less those that we have been also been able to celebrate, especially in the events that we have. So as we host the third Kampala Innovation Week, us as Startup Uganda, we're excited because we've seen our ecosystem move from 0 to 1 to 2, and we are yet to see it move from where it is to another level. So it's an exciting opportunity, Dr. Christian, that we are discussing this, and we are looking forward to getting more of the exposure, more of the insights into how we can definitely do better. I know my colleagues will be adding on onto what I'm already saying, and before they come through, I just wanted to quickly go through what Startup Uganda as well has been able to do for the last 3 years that we are celebrating today. It's a bit of an excitement because we started this as an association, not as an association for startups, but an association for organizations that support entrepreneurship and innovation. So it is also exciting that an association of startups like the German Startup Association has been able to do quite a lot. So meaning that the voices that we are raising, the efforts that we're putting together will not definitely go to waste. So just as Dr. Christian has said, the German startup ecosystem is growing with efforts, with confidence that the startups themselves have been able to build. So for us here at Startup Uganda, we said, okay, for us to give morale, for us to give a push to the communities of startups that we support, let's also come together. Let's form an association that will be speaking the same language, will be presenting the same challenges that all our communities are facing, especially when it comes to coming up with policies, coming up with solutions that create an enabling environment. So just like Dr. Christian has said, coming up with an enabling environment where innovation, where entrepreneurship, where businesses thrive is all our end goal. And we're not so much different from what the vision or the mission of the German startup ecosystem is looking at. So we also here in Uganda would want to see a Uganda where innovators, where entrepreneurs can easily access this support that we call the business women support, where they can start, where they can grow, and where they can celebrate the scaling of their businesses. And we've been able to do this through a number of things, Dr. Christian. And at least now we celebrate 28 member organizations that are currently supporting the ecosystem. We have worked with over 6,000 startups that belong to the communities that we support. At least most of our members have been able to raise about $10 billion for the last 2 years, which I think is a great effort. I remember on Monday showing you about 30% of women-led or women-founded enterprises, or women-founded startups. But Startup Uganda, we're focusing at least being able to increase this 46% of those that we are reaching. We are reaching about 46% young women who own or who have co-founded startups. And we want to see how we can raise this to 50% and above. And again, through our initiative, Dr. Christian, we've been able to reach up to about 1 million entrepreneurs in the last 2 years. through our initiatives, through our program activities, we've been able to acquire about 10 partners that we work with, and these government units, these are private sector organizations, some are development partners who are supporting the work that we do. About 1 million jobs have been created by the entrepreneurs themselves, but also through the initiatives, projects, programs that we as well run. And we are now spread across the region. In Uganda, usually we have 4 regions: the northern, the southern, the eastern, the western, and we have members across these regions. Members in our communities always support SDGs. It's one of the focus areas, the focus sectors that we support, and it is our intention that at least we can cover all the 17 SDGs in future. Again, we celebrate about $1 million US that our members, I mean these organizations that support entrepreneurs, have also been able to unlock some funding. And this is the funding that they are using to run some programs. This is the funding that they are using to run some events like the Kampala Innovation Week that we are hosting this week. Some of the members that we celebrate today, there are more that you may not see on this slide because of the limitation of the slide, but there are some of the member organizations that have celebrated decades. There are those that have just started maybe for the last 2 years, 3 years. And again, our focus, Dr. Christian, would be spreading the gospel of entrepreneurship, of innovation, and business growth. Ideally, we also believe that people need to understand that entrepreneurship, business support, business incubation is something that must be done across the globe, across the country. And again, we also realize that the biggest percentage of Ugandans may not appreciate this yet. So we're doing all we can, Dr. Christian, to ensure that this gospel of entrepreneurship, this gospel of encouraging startup growth actually happens within the region. Maybe to sum up my remarks, we host the Kampala Innovation Week. This is the 3rd time we are hosting it. We also have a web portal which provides information, which provides a platform where entrepreneurs can meet, development partners can find information about what is happening with the ecosystem, but also can help us gather thoughts and information about what startups are looking out for. The other very important thing we do, Dr. Christian, is to celebrate success. So for instance, on Friday, as we conclude the Kampala Innovation Week, we want to acknowledge, we want to celebrate startups that have exceedingly done well for this year. And so we shall be having Startup Uganda Awards where we recognize them and we award them at the end of the day. We do run a number of challenges, which include the Startup Uganda Innovation Challenge. And as well, this is a way of giving platform to those startups that in specific sectors, but they are doing so well, but also in one or the other, support them with some little funding that we can have secured through partners. And again, as you already commented, we run the Startup Uganda annual survey, which looks at the ecosystem, which areas are good for startup growth, what is the current status of every startup that we work with, the average startup, how long has it been in business, and all that. And very importantly, something that I want Dr. Christian to comment on maybe much later is about the Startup Act for Uganda. I don't know, for instance, policy-wise, how in Germany the environment is, especially from the government side. As we try to come up with conversations around the Startup Act for Uganda, I would want you to give us a feel of what you think. Is it something that is necessary for us to start pushing? And again, how have you been able to do this for the last years you have been in this business? As I conclude my remarks, again, one more last slide is that we would want to see organizations or groups or associations that support startups or entrepreneurship, would want them to see these organizations strengthened in a way of capacity building, so they have a better capacity, better resources, better infrastructure, better programming, favorable, or what you call reliable and impactful events that we run. We don't want to just run events that are just for events, but for the sake of our startups, we want to see them get value out of these events. We want to see our innovators being supported better. I mean, in terms of, can we help them access capital, access markets, not only local markets, but also global markets, and also access the financing that they need, of course, to operate or to grow. And then at the end of the day, we would want to see that information that they need, especially information about the clients, information about the market, information about the sectors that they are probably building their businesses in. We want to see this information available. And this will definitely be one of the things that we're looking forward for the growth of the ecosystem. So I won't stop here. I'm sure my colleagues will have a number of thoughts to raise. But Dr. Christian, if it's something that is fast-tracking that you need to probably comment on my remarks, I will gladly welcome that. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Gilbert, for your presentation. Again, very impressive what you already achieved, and the similarities are huge, and that's impressive. And I think it's the right way to go. And that's also what we found out during our journey as the German Startup Association, that there is not one size fits all or one solution for all the startups. The startups are also very different. There are different sectors, there are different industries, there are different needs. So you need to find a way to cater for most of them with different angles. One comment from my side when it comes to the Startup Act. Here in Germany, there is not a particular Startup Act just for the startups. So because there are so many challenges, starting from bureaucracy, how long it's taking to set up a company, how difficult it is to distribute shares to employees, how different it is to get a loan from a bank still as a startup. So there are different layers of complexity. So, and we try to address them on these or in these different levels. We would love to have a Startup Act, but I believe the Startup Act would be too complex to really cater for all the needs and challenges. So rather try to have different groups looking after the different topics and needs. And that's also why we have these different platforms, why we have different networks. For example, currently we try to influence a lot of legislation when it comes to artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence is fairly new to all of us, and there's not a lot of legislation or acts around it. But the startups are the ones who are very early in the process. They are the ones setting up these kind of businesses. They are the ones within the artificial intelligence field. So they know exactly what they need. So that's how we try to influence the politicians, but also the policymakers to be better suited and to cater for the needs. Just on that. Yeah, let me also maybe ask you a question, because it was for me very impressive to see how many startups and entrepreneurs you are reaching. I mean, you said you are reaching nearly 1 million entrepreneurs. That's something where I think we are behind, because we reach maybe, let's say, 5,000 to 6,000 a year. So how do you do that? Are these mainly events driven? Is that through the local presence in the different provinces? I mean, how do you reach so many people? That's very impressive.
Yeah, so Dr. Christian, it is really true. I mean, you must have read about facts that point to Uganda being really entrepreneurial, and no doubt that you find so many young people, especially the youth, being creative, being innovative, and coming up with small-scale businesses, small-scale industries. And again, on a lower scale, I could say, most of these startups that are being reached are those that are at ideation level, those that are into, for instance, a level that is maybe ready for incubation, if I could say. So I know where we are doing exceedingly well is on ideation and incubation. But again, we don't have startups that are not so many that are at, for instance, scaling and growth. So I would probably want also, as I answer this question, the startups that you say you're reaching out, are those that are at scaling, are those that are already in the market, that are selling, and that are having probably high revenues that are coming from their products or services. I mean, for us, we're looking at the wholesome approach of how many startups have our communities been able to reach. So no doubt that for instance, if I could give an example of the 28 members of Startup Uganda that we work with, at least you find when each member of Startup Uganda is having at least over 100,000 entrepreneurs that is reaching. And most of them are these that need a bit of support to probably organize themselves, create better teams. So I think, just to answer your question, we've exceedingly done well in sort of empowering and creating the buzz of please start up something, please come up with something that you want to start. But then where we think we need a lot of learning and relearning is about how do you move from ideation or from just a small startup now to a business, a bigger or medium or level. We're going to call them medium or large scale businesses that can actually sell to probably maybe 100 people or more than that. So we are now trying to create a culture of innovation, a culture of entrepreneurship, a culture of being able to do something by yourself and that brings you some revenue out of the usual careers of being corporate or professional in other areas.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Let me quickly go to one of the questions in the chat from Ken. Ken is asking about the state-backed funding, which is a really interesting question because it looks fairly high. Maybe I need to clarify on this a little bit. That includes a lot of the innovation hubs, but also incubators, for example, at universities. And universities are mainly state-funded here in Germany. So for a lot of the founders and the startups, there is an environment at universities, at research centers, where they can grow, starting from office spaces, but also smaller support structures, from coaching, business model development, business plan writing. So that's covered through that area of state-backed funding. It's not purely like subsidies or other things from government, just to clarify on that. Still, most of the startups would like to see more risk capital, venture capital coming into the market. And if you compare it with the US or China or even Israel, Germany is far behind. It's really far behind. You would be surprised to see the statistics. And there is not a lot of VC venture capital money currently in the market. And I hope, and I see already in Africa, that this is changing, with some successful entrepreneurs giving back VC money to the ecosystem, especially in early stages. That's brilliant. That's, for example, how the US, how Israel grew in the last 2 or 3 decades, because of all these successful entrepreneurs. And it's not only the big ones like Facebook, Amazon, and so on. So they are all smaller ones who made their millions, so to say. But then they founded some VC funds to give back the money to other startups. So that's something we don't see in Germany, unfortunately. But we can already see some of these things growing now in Africa. Nigeria is a good example, but also Kenya. So are you seeing that also in Uganda, that some venture capital money is coming through Uganda at the moment?
Yeah. Stand as well, Dr. Christian. I mean, for us here, we are doing a lot of efforts towards creating working spaces, business incubators, accelerators. But again, it's been a slow journey for us, because most of the entrepreneurs and the startups haven't appreciated that they need business support. They need to be incubated before they can actually go out there and start selling. I mean, and I've seen it in one of your slides, that one of the areas that is really crucial is the business development. Product development here, I see our entrepreneurs doing quite well, but when it comes to selling, commercializing their products or services has been an issue. So maybe you could tell us about that, Dr. Christian. How has it been handled? Do you have more of these incubators? Do you have more of innovation hubs? What is the journey like for most of the startups when they have had their products and now it's time to actually put them out there in the market?
It's still a challenge. It's still a challenge for the startups. Unfortunately, we do have great innovations and inventions, but still you need to find the right entrepreneurs. It's not only about innovating a product or a service or a platform. You also need to have the mindset to give young people the opportunity to become an entrepreneur. In Germany, a lot of these young people, they think, okay, we have to go to school. After school, there's university, and then there are some corporates employing me. So you need to also plant the seed that entrepreneurship is an opportunity for your future, that you can make the difference as an entrepreneur with your products and services. And unfortunately, within these innovation hubs or incubators, accelerators, this is something which is not really helped with. They all think someone who's reaching out to an innovation hub is already an entrepreneur, but they are not. So they still need to have some more support. And that's also what we try to work on as a startup association, to really bring together the entrepreneurs, that they can learn from each other, that they can share their experiences, and that they are encouraged to really go out and say, well, that's a great product, that's a great service, let's found a business, let's rocket it, let's go to market and make it happen. So that's really important. What we also try, and that's something I think similar with the Kampala Innovation Week, we try to give visibility to the startups.
Yeah.
Because especially if you're young, if you're just coming from university, I mean, your network is very limited. It's limited to your colleagues at university, it's limited to your family. So, but through the Startup Association, some pitch events, some other conferences, they get the visibility and they get to spread the word about the product and the services. And surprisingly, I would say nearly 2/3 of the German startups are more in a B2B space, business to business, instead of directly going to the end consumer, because they see a huge chance for an exit or for an acquisition by a big corporate.
I mean, that's surprising because here it's the opposite. We've seen most of our startups struggling in B2C kind of business models. And I think this could be one of those things that I think we need to learn. Maybe potentially it's because of the markets that are available. Not so many of B2C business models would definitely maybe thrive here because of the bigger markets in the communities rather than the business environment. But again, just from what just said Dr. Christian, before I take on other questions, I see one in our chat. There's been this rhetoric and inspiration of entrepreneurs from the likes of Zuckerberg, who have been able to disrupt the world. And these are guys who are normally labeled, they dropped out of school, so somehow school did not add value to what they are currently doing. I mean, Dr. Christian, you're a doctor. I would want to get your perspective on that. Most of the entrepreneurs sort of getting, what I could say, wrong inspiration, right? They would want to do things by themselves. And we've just seen a presentation from your side about statistics that show that most of the startups have gone through school, have gone through college, have graduated. And again, the statistics I shared yesterday had more or less the same thing. They were showing how most of the startups have actually attained maybe the first level degree, a bachelor's or a diploma. So what's your take on that, Doctor?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's important to talk about it. The statistics show us that a lot of successful entrepreneurs went through university, have a degree, and even a lot of them started working for a corporate. So the most successful startups we see is not the startups out of university, just for that. So it is startups after university with 5 to 10 years of experience in the market, because you need to have a network, you need to have a proper business understanding, from accounting, management, sales, marketing. So there are so many fields where you can learn from the corporate. And yes, there are some examples. If you look at Mark Zuckerberg, yes, he did not finish university. But if you look at Jeff Bezos, the Amazon founder, he did, and he first worked for a different company. Also, all the big IT companies, Oracle, SAP, they all were founded after a few years in business. So it is very important to get or to gain these experiences and the knowledge. Do you need a doctorate? Most likely not. That's something, I mean, I did myself because I was really interested, but I actually did it with entrepreneurship education. So I wrote my doctorate about the entrepreneurs, about this opportunity to become an entrepreneur instead of just working for the big corporates. But you need to talk about it in the ecosystem. And you also should not, I mean, sell these very few stories from Amazon, Apple, and co, because it's very rare, these type of successes. So most of the startups, they don't have that visibility. You also don't need to, you can't make a hype out of it. You need to be very honest that it is hard work. It is a lot of passion, and you need to have a proper business understanding. And that's also, and linking to the question Nicholas raised in the chat, it is also important to tell them straight from the beginning, you need to have the right strategy. You need to see the big picture. A lot of startups do the mistakes that they start with the product and the service, and they are focusing just on the product and the services. And then after a year or two, they might have a brilliant service or a brilliant product, but they don't know to who to sell. They don't know how to price it. They don't know how the marketing works. They even don't know if Uganda is the right market for that type of product, or if they should rather go to a different country. We also had a question in the chat, what about the opportunity for tourism in Germany? Yes, there are opportunities, but you need to see the big picture. So you need to structure your business straight from the beginning with various angles. That's also then why when it becomes important to have the right team, like-minded, but with complementary competencies. It's not if there are 5 brilliant IT people, yes, they might develop a platform, maybe the best software as a service solution. But if you don't have a business person on board who can sell it, you won't make any money. So it is really important straight from the beginning to have the right setup, the right team, to see the big picture, and to do the homework around marketing, sales, customers is really important. And that big picture, you can't have just after university. You need to gain some experience, either during your time when you're at university through internship or other type of work, or maybe in 5 to 10 years with a big corporate. But there's one huge difference, and I would like to highlight that here, between the German market and the African market. There is, of course, a development gap. The German market is very developed in a lot of areas, in a lot of sectors. In many African countries, there are still daily needs and daily challenges which need to be solved. And that's where also the not so experienced founders come in, because they know the problems. They are close to the customers. They understand the market, the culture, and everything. So I think that's a huge difference. So if I can recommend, yes, you should have a proper education, but you know the challenges, and to address them helps to grow the economies in the different countries. So not wait for another 5 to 10 years before you start. As I said, it's a different environment. So that's really, really important.
And I mean, that brings me to my last question before I can ask our audience to bring in their question. I would want you to speak to research documentation and data as an opportunity for startups or entrepreneurship ecosystems that we have, both ours here in Uganda and Germany. It's not that sometimes our startups probably wouldn't want to do this research, but research is an expensive kind of venture to go into, so you must have resources. But at the same time, probably it would need to be backed by, for instance, the government or research institutions like universities, which currently we don't see here. So I would want you to speak to that. How is data, how is documentation, information, something that we would want to start working on, of course, with CAS, on looking at how we can map our ecosystem, understand it deeper than what we just see all over media or just on the surface. We want to understand the ecosystem much better, and probably this information is what most of our startups and entrepreneurs will be looking for. Doctor?
Yeah, the data around the startup ecosystem is there here in Germany because we do the German Startup Monitor, and that's really helpful because it's highlighting the areas where we are already very successful, where the ecosystem is functioning, but it also highlights the needs. It is interesting that during the 9 years of the Startup Monitor, to summarize the needs and the challenges, it all comes down to funding, less bureaucracy, so easier foundation processes and so on. So it's about the processes, the bureaucracy and the funding. The rest is, for example, finding right resources. It is there, it is possible. And that's the beauty of the startups, because that's everywhere the same. It's the same in Uganda. I mean, all your startups, they look for funding, they look for support, and they might look for an easier process when it comes to the setup of the company and everything. So the data is there. What we might need to do the way forward together with CAS is to really compare the structure we have in our Startup Monitor to see if that is something you can apply. And you already have many of these information, but how to put it together. And if you see how many people read the Startup Monitor, it's not only the startup scene, it's also the big corporates, because they also want to know what's going on. Where are the startups? What kind of trends are they driving? What kind of transformation is going on in various sectors? Where are the innovations coming from? So the big corporates, they also looking quite in detail into the startup scene to understand. And that's something I think for Uganda, what could create a huge benefit to the overall economy, to link, to be transparent about the startup scene, to also give the bigger corporates an understanding where they can fit in, where they can benefit and leverage from each other.
Yeah. Right, sounds good. We are looking forward to this interaction. Of course, this being the preliminary kind of initiatives into our partnership with CAS and what we can focus on to build our ecosystem here, so that we are at a level where we can also say our ecosystem is growing. So I want to welcome remarks, comments, and questions from my colleagues on call and the audience. And if I don't put someone on spotlight, allow me to invite in my colleague Albert. Albert has been most of our initiatives. He works with the UNDP. UNDP is one of those UN agencies that has been supporting innovation. Of late, they had the Youth Ideathon, which was a nationwide initiative of encouraging ideation into entrepreneurship. So if Albert, if you can hear me, please, I want to welcome your remarks and probably one or two words that come from your side. Albert?
Thank you so much, Gilbert. Sorry, my network is not so good. I think let me just keep my video off. I've been listening in, and thank you so much, Doctor, for that great presentation. And also the remarks from Nicholas, those are really good, including yours too from you yourself, Gilbert. I just wanted to ask, Doctor, from your experience in Germany, usually when these startups exit the startup stage, do they get into another kind of consortium that supports them or that builds further their business strength so that the economy is still maintained strong? When they exit that stage, what happens next? And what commitments do they have to help those that are coming after them?
Yeah, we as an association, I mean, we support, especially in early stage and let's say in the growth stage, because these are the most challenging phases for a startup. As I said, it is a lot around funding, but also a lot around transparency. I think once the startups are in the growth stage or even in the exit stage at some point, there is not a lot of support we have currently from the Startup Association, because that should be after like 5, 6, 7 years when they really establish the business already. And then other mechanisms are relevant, because then they have access to normal bank loans, they have access to other support mechanisms for also other corporates. It's not purely then a startup supporting system. So that goes hand in hand in Germany. There's not enough for the early stages of startups, but there's definitely enough for the later stages, especially when you established the business, when you are growing.
All right.
What we still need is
okay. Thank you so much. I was actually asking more in on the side of policy. Say, sorry. More on the policy side, say when there is need to push for certain policy or maybe some regulation or any kind of things that would actually help so much from the government side in terms of regulation and maintaining the hello, I don't know if I'm having issues with my network.
Albert, we can hear you. We can hear you well.
Hello, Gilbert, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well, Albert.
Okay. Yeah, Doctor, I was just saying, as I wanted so much to hear on the side of policy and what kind of support or what kind of consortiums they usually have to advocate for some policy changes or some enactment of certain policies to actually aid business to be able to move much better and to be much stronger in certain areas. Okay, I think I was just getting echoes. I thought maybe it was my network. All right, but also to hint on what Gilbert mentioned earlier on, UNDP indeed did some. We ran an ideathon where we put out a call for different innovators, different youth, various youth actually to compete in a number of thematic areas, ranging from health, ICT, smart cities, agriculture, and many others. And we had over 4,800 ideas. All these we went through the various stages, selecting the very best in different stages, given a certain criteria. And those that actually emerged as the top 1,000 are going through incubation. Those that emerged as the top 100, also on top of incubation, they received some funding. And these are also all part of the efforts beyond what government gives, but also from development partners like UNDP to help build the startup ecosystem. So as you mentioned earlier on, some of those that Startup Uganda has actually reached out, where there's so many. Gilbert was actually on point when he said we have so many ideas, we have so many innovative young people, and what they lack, what has been lacking in most of them for a long time has been the incubation and actually the bit of moving away from those initial stages into the next. How do they then get into the growth stage? How do they get into the stages of scaling up and all that? So that is it basically. And I'm actually grateful that you're sharing your experiences with us. I believe there's a lot that we shall pick from the German side. And all the best to Startup Uganda. Thank you. Over to you, Gilbert.
Thanks, Albert. I think you raised good questions, but you also gave insights again. What's currently happening in Uganda. I think I now better understood your first question around the policies. As I said earlier in the discussion, we don't have like a startup act. We don't have a specific like startup policy. So we try to influence the policy makers where needed. That could be for setting up new regulations for new sectors, as I said, artificial intelligence. That could also be the bureaucracy of setting up a company. That could be the easier access to funding and support structures. So there are various layers for where we try to influence the policymakers. But one thing is very important in Germany, and I think that's also something for Uganda, is we reached with more than 1,000 members a really critical mass to be visible to the policymakers. And all the political parties who are in charge for new policy, they reach out on a regular basis to the startup. What are the important topics? What's currently in the startup scene happening? Is there anything we can help with? So the dialogue with the politicians is very intense, because we do represent a huge and a very, everybody is into the startup scene. Everybody wants to be, let's call it, young, fancy, and innovative. So we don't have the problem actually in Germany that the policymakers are not listening to us. Yes, there are still some areas where we can improve, but a lot of the policymakers even reach out to the Startup Association to get these kind of insights. So that's very important, to bundle the interests and to speak with one voice as a Startup Association. And I think Startup Uganda is on the right way. Development partners was also another thing you mentioned, Albert. I don't see many development partners here in Germany. It's a different environment from the economy. It's really more about the venture capital investors. It's more about the business angels helping, especially in the incubation phase, and then going into like the growth stage. There is no like DFIs or some like other multinational institutions like the European Union. That's nothing what we see. Nevertheless, there are programs helping to structure for these growth stage, and the ecosystem is really learning from each other. And there is not, as I said earlier, one size fits all, or there's one recipe you can use to grow your business. It highly depends. And that's also why the business angels concept is so important. A lot of these business angels are former CEOs, former founders, successful business people who then guide the young people in the startups with their advice from a business perspective, from a development perspective, to really bring them from incubation state to a growth state. So it's really based on experiences. There are no formalized programs in Germany, but that's also why the ecosystems need to grow over time. It's not like you implement one policy or you implement one support structure and then everything is already working. It is based a lot on experiences and the exchange and giving that knowledge further to other generations.
Yeah, amazing. Many thanks again, Doctor, for those insights. And I mean, lastly, from my side, Dr. Christian, you must have probably read about and visit some of these African countries that probably doing it a little different from what we are doing in Uganda. And of course, in no time, you will be acquainted with what we are doing and probably how we are doing it. And this partnership is eventually to see how we can strengthen our ecosystem here. So my question is, from those ecosystems that you have interacted with, like I saw you've had already discussion with the Israel kind of ecosystem, is there something particularly of your thoughts or something that really caught your eye that you think with the African markets, the African entrepreneurs will need to focus on? It could be technology that, for instance, the German started in the ecosystem where you serve. Women, could it be culture, could it be for us as African startup ecosystems? So we need to leverage on for us to get to where we will be proud of our ecosystems.
Yeah, you're right. I've been to many countries. I've seen different startup environments from Senegal, Gambia, Ghana, Nigeria, but also Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, also South Africa, and so on. I think the strength of these ecosystems is the collaboration. That's what I've seen. It's really the collaboration. It's solving daily needs. I spoke to one of the founder, once to a founder in Kenya, and he said to me, "Listen, Christian, you in Germany, you are founding the 10th dog walking startup no one needs. We in Africa, we are solving problems for the people, and that's why we are successful." So the thinking you are having in Africa, and that's across the countries, it's not specific to one country, it is specific to Africa. You think in community, you think in solving problems, and it's not a competition. Yes, there is sometimes, but you still have so many areas you can improve. It is synergetic. Amazing. And you work together, and that's brilliant to see, and I'm jealous to see that, because in Germany it's like silos. It's our startup, this. In Africa, you work together, and that's your big strength. There's a brother, there's a sister, there's a community, and you look after each other. So that's one thing which is for me very important. And the second is the perspective. The startups today in Africa will be the middle class of the future and will be the corporates of the future. So that ambition and that goal and that bright future ahead of you should be the motivation for setting up a startup. And I think also the moment you speak more about the startup scene in Africa, the more transparent it becomes through like a startup monitor or through associations like Startup Uganda and so on. You will also attract appetite and interest from institutions, from politics, and from also big corporates to work with you. And that will also, again, open new doors. So yes, there are similarities, as we found out earlier, but the people will be the differentiator. And Africa has great young people, and you should never forget about it, because that's the strength. Europe is decreasing. Our population is decreasing. We need the young entrepreneurs from Africa setting up something in a corridor. That's not a one-way street. It's not just from Germany to Africa. It's also from Africa to Germany, and we can learn a lot from you guys. Honestly, I lived in Africa. I work in Africa since more than 10 years. Africa is the future. It's the century for Africa and for African entrepreneurs.
A great inspiration, Dr. Christian. Africa is the future. Ladies and gentlemen, I seem to be through with my questions, and I want to give you the platform, maybe the next about 10 minutes. We could take on your remarks, your thoughts, your additions to the discussion. And of course, remember that we are still in the Kampala Innovation Week that started on Monday 22nd, and we'll be concluding the week with the Startup Uganda Awards and the closing ceremony, which is on Friday. And of course, we are all invited. So I want to check through to see if there is any hand up or any mic that is open for remarks, for additions, for questions, before we can end this interaction. And this is basically the beginning, the interaction with CAS Uganda and Southern Sudan, together with Dr. Christian, started off this Campaign Innovation Week. But of course, it is a discussion that is going to be for a bit longer period of time. Any comments, any questions? Okay, I seem not to see any other question coming through or any hand up, unless Mr. Nicholas, you have your final remarks, your final thoughts about where this is going, where this discussion will be leading to. I want to request you to maybe say one or two words before we can conclude our call. Nicholas?
Thank you, Gilbert, for your insightful discussion along with Dr. Christian. I think being an ecosystem builder, there are very key messages that I've been able to take away from this discussion, and it never grows old. Collaboration, partnership is what gets things moving. Like Dr. Christian mentioned, that one of the biggest strengths we have is the sense of community. We always think of each other and look out for each other. And I think for startups to be able to survive and scale beyond this pandemic, that's going to be a main highlight. Working together and looking out for other networks. The strength comes through being able to create market linkages to other markets, to other networks, other people that you're not able to access to at the moment. And I think for this partnership, certainly we're going to have a lot more activities coming out, because we want to engage the startups. We want to see them create the value that they need to create. We also want them to be able to build the capacity they need to have so they can be able to compete locally and globally and be able to achieve the community impact that's expected of them. This is it for me in a nutshell. Thank you once again to Dr. Christian for making your time to share your insights with us. Gilbert and team, I can't thank you enough. The Kampala Innovation Week has been a success, and we look forward to the closing ceremony.
Sure. Great. I won't leave without giving Dr. Christian a chance to give his final remarks. But before that, I see Kenneth's hand is up. Kenneth, I would want to think that must be some very hot question for Dr. Christian before we can let him give his final words. Kenneth?
Gilbert, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Gilbert?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Gilbert, and the other contributors to the conversation. My name is Kenneth. I am the team leader at TechBuzz Hub and a member of Startup Uganda. What I just wanted to ask Dr. Christian is, I've seen they have a very huge membership of startups. I didn't get it clearly whether it is membership of startups or startup support organizations, but whatever it is, the question is, how do you keep that big number involved and active within your community, and what are their roles if in an engagement like this Startup Uganda, the members are involved in organizing events and what have you, forming the secretariat, etc. But then in such a very big membership, what is the role of each member, and how does that role translate into supporting the ecosystem in general? Thank you so much.
So the more than 1,000 members are really startups. There is also a different membership for support organizations or for corporates who can come also and join the Startup Association. but not as a startup where we try to be the voice for them. So it's really like supporting institutions, supporting corporates. Of course, they have to pay a little bit more to fund us, which is great to see the commitment of these companies. But the more than 1,000 members, they pay 50 euros a year. So it's affordable for most of the startups. So that's in regards to the membership. We engage with them in particular through the different sector groups and our different platforms. So we give them a space for their sector, for their needs, where they can exchange with others. So that's the biggest benefit also what we receive as a feedback, that they can engage with their own peers in the same sectors, in the same industries. But because of the size we are having, we are also able to offer them some benefits. For example, you all know AWS as a cloud provider for IT. So AWS, for example, the Amazon Web Service, they are a partner of the Startup Association. And we, for example, can offer, because of our size, really good rates for cloud services. And there are other partners on board where we have like a corporate benefit program for our startups to help them with. And then, of course, there are startups really volunteering to set up platforms for others. So they engage because they want to have like a B2B connection, because their own business model is B2B, or they want to learn from each other. So there are various levels of engagement and involvement for the startups, and the benefits, of course, are also different. I think now we lost him, unfortunately, Ken.
Oh yeah, we're sorry about that. So, Doctor, I think you can use the same chance to probably air out your last words, your remarks. What's your advice and your comments that you want to spread out to the ecosystem in Uganda? And what should we look out for this partnership that we'll be starting? Yeah.
Thank you. I'm impressed. I'm impressed by the young entrepreneurs in Uganda. I'm impressed by your organization, Gilbert, what you as Startup Uganda do. I'm impressed by the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, that they see that this is a huge chance and that this is the right way to support your journey. I think you've done a lot of the right things to start that journey. Seeing the engagement during the Kampala Innovation Week, seeing the participants today in our workshop. So it is completely right to do this journey and to be on that journey. And I can only offer my help, my support where needed. I would love to continue this discussion, and we will most likely meet in person early next year. That's what I already discussed with Anna and Nicolas from Konrad Adenauer Foundation. I would love to come to Kampala, meet all you in person. I would love to take some energy away from inspiring African entrepreneurs, and you have a lot of them. So I can only encourage you to continue with the journey you're currently on. It will be a successful journey. It will help the entrepreneurs to be successful. It will help the economy of Uganda to strengthen and to grow. So again, congratulations to that great initiative, to the great Kampala Innovation Week. And thanks a lot for having me. It was a real pleasure discussing and speaking with you. Thanks so much, and a lot of greetings from Germany to Uganda.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. And as you come to Uganda, definitely we'll also be planning to come to Germany. Would want to get that inspiration much more, would want to get that exposure. And I know Nicolas has really hinted on that exchange program that will be happening. So we want to thank you, Dr. Christian Linfeld. Dr. Christian is the Africa coordinator for the German Startup Association. It's been myself, Gilbert, from Startup Uganda, Programs and Partnerships Manager. And again, of course, we've had Nicolas Sopolot from CAS Uganda and Southern Sudan, who is the Programs Officer on call. Of course, we can't fail to thank you for all those who have been live with us on this discussion, those who have followed the discussion on our other platforms, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, and Hubilo. It's really been a pleasure. Kampala Innovation Week continues. We'll be going in for another panel discussion that is live and hosted by one of our members, and that is the Response Innovation Lab about food systems. We'll be discussing food systems. And of course, we'll have tomorrow, Friday, still up for us to engage, celebrate our ecosystem. I want to thank you so much, and I want to wish you a very good evening. Thank you and God bless.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Cheers.